What's up guys, Jake from AJ Sports here. Welcome to today's video, and just like we did a few days ago, make predictions for the Premier League. This time we are going to be doing it for Serie A, and we're going to be putting each team into the positions where I think that they are going to finish for this upcoming 24-25 Serie A season that is going to begin on the weekend. Now let's get right into it. So first off, we are going to be looking into obviously the relegation, and obviously we're going to be keeping a close eye in this regard to the new promoted teams from Serie B, who were Como, Venezia and Parma. And also there are a couple of other teams in the Serie A that I think are going to come close into thereabouts in the relegation side. Teams of the likes of Lecce, Verona, Cagliari and Empoli. So all that in mind, we're going to kick this off with our first prediction, which is 20th place, and I think it's going to be the newly promoted side Venezia. Now obviously looking at their time in Serie B last year, making their way through promotion in the playoffs, and they went all the way and won, and they've got good things going for them. Like, they're a very attack-minded side. They scored the most goals in Serie B last season with 69 goals. But the type of football that they play defensively can leave them very vulnerable. Very, very vulnerable. And out of the three promoted sides, they conceded the most goals. And I just think when they come up against certainly the top half of the table, they are going to have a really, really horrid time with the type of football that they play. Very attack-minded and not much security provided on the back. So I don't think that it's going to be a very successful season back for Venezia. But one thing we know for certain, they're going to have the best kit in the league. And that's really the only thing that they're going to have going for them. On the playing side, I think they're going to drop. And in at 19th, I'm going for Empoli. Empoli last season just missing out on relegation, but by 1 point. They were just 1 point ahead of Frosinone, who finished 18th last season, and they had a spectacular season at the very beginning, but then dropped off. Empoli, just throughout the season, they were just stringing along and picking up the odd result that was helping them out. And I think it was just more of a case of the teams that finished below them being much, much worse than Empoli. Like, if Frosinone if they kept their form going, like how they started, then this wouldn't be a conversation. Empoli would have 100% dropped down and finished in relegation. And when Juve were playing them particularly, which I watched both games, they were very easy to break down. And going forward, their tactical setup for creating and trying to score goals was very predictable. The way that they play, I just think any team that plays against them, probably with the exception of Venezia maybe, and the other low-level sides that are going to finish thereabouts from relegation, I don't really see them and how they play the game getting them any points. And they've got no real spark in their team. Nothing very sensational to brag about and make you think that this could get us a win today. Like, that player could produce something spectacular that could get us the win. And with all that in mind, I just think that this is going to be quite a poor standard of football in the history of Empoli in Serie A, and they're going to finish 19th. And the final place, 18th place in the three relegation spots, I'm going to give it to Cagliari. I think Cagliari are going to drop down to Serie B after just spending one season back, and I think it's heavily going to be influenced by Ranieri. For me personally, I think last season and Cagliari just escaping relegation, it was just more of the fact that the players were just producing that little bit more for Ranieri because that was his last season as a professional coach. And then with the new appointment in, I don't see it going to be anything similar or even better than the type of football that Ranieri produced for Cagliari. And they do have some decent individuals in there. Like, individually, they have got some players that can do something in the odd certain game. But overall, with especially the new teams coming up that I think are going to be performing a much better standard than what I think Cagliari offer at the minute. And I did think Cagliari would do well and escape relegation, and they did do that last season. But I think doing it 2 seasons on the bounce is going to be a big ask for them to stay up. So my 3 teams that I think are going to drop down to Serie B is Venezia, Empoli and Cagliari. Which means that I think the teams that are going to remain safe and just narrowly miss out on relegation and continue their journey in Serie A. First off, at 17th, I'm going for Como. Under the leadership and guidance of Cesc Fabregas, and it was a bit of a weird selection for like head coach for the last year. Like, there was a period where he was just the interim coach, Cesc Fabregas. Then he decided to take a break, and then he was reappointed again as the head coach. But now we know for a certain he is the head coach. He has signed a long-term deal with Como. And the type of football that he is trying to produce for Como, that we've seen many of these new young coaches in European football, like Arteta, like Xabi Alonso, he's really trying to implement a real quality attacking philosophy with this Italian side. He loves to build up from the back. He likes to invert the fullbacks and really build from the ground up and try and produce something spectacular. So it's not just effective football. He is trying to make this club be renowned for playing some magnificent, beautiful football. And we did see that on a number of occasions last season in Serie B. And with Parma just dropping off, racking up the draws towards the end, Como was keeping on their tail, and they only finished 3 points behind Parma for the Serie B title. So he has got a real good thing going here. And I think that the type of football that he is making this team play, and I think with the investment, the little investment that Como have been putting in to the team, individually, obviously, if you look at the players, they're nothing to brag about. But like every great coach, he doesn't need just big superstars to make a team. He gets everyone within that squad playing the type of football that he wants and needs to make this team a successful one. So that is a reason why I'm putting Como in at 17th. And at 16th, I'm going for Lecce. Last season, when I made my prediction, I expected Lecce to be in the relegation. And last season in Serie A, they finished, in my opinion, above expectations. They were getting towards the mid-table, finishing 14th. And there was a period where they were even in the European football spots. But they eventually dropped off. And I think now they're experienced enough to know what they need to do and how to play other teams to get certain results so that they can stay in Serie A. And I don't think that they are now a team that is going to be constantly in contention for relegation. Even though I do have them at 16th, I think for most of this season, they're going to be hovering above the mid-table section. And towards the end, they'll start dropping off because they would have felt that they had done enough. But that's how I see it with the teams that are just going to narrowly escape relegation and just finish above that place. It is Como at 17th and Lecce at 16th. Now, teams that are going to be making their way at lower mid-table, and first one on that list in 15th place, I do have Verona. Like Lecce last season, I thought Verona would have been around the relegation and actually would have been relegated. But like Lecce, performed well above expectations, and they still got them experienced individuals within their squad that have been in Serie A for some time and, you know, really do perform when they need to. I don't anticipate anything special from Verona. I just think it's going to be a case where they're just going to be drifting along around that mid-table area and just finish towards the end, at the end of the season, by dropping off in results, especially if they're going to be playing some of the big teams who have got something to play for, like European football, maybe compete for the title. I think that will be the case. So I'd have Verona in at 15th. In at 14th, I do have Parma. Parma coming up have, on paper, one of the best teams we've seen come up to Serie A for some number of years now. They've got some individuals in this team which I think could play for a lot of the mid-table teams in Serie A. They got some quality players in the likes of Dennisman and Mihaila, both Romanian internationals who just performed at the Euros and actually played some good football for the international nations. Got Bernardi, Spanish international, who's a terrific attacking midfielder. Boni, who's been a very experienced Serie B striker, but I think could definitely play for some of the Serie A clubs that are in this league at the minute. Some very experienced players, Del Patro, right back. They all across the board have got a good team. But they've got individually some decent players who can play for a lot of the mid-table sides in Serie A. And they were a very good side in Serie B last season. Obviously, dropping off towards the end with a lot of draws. But overall, they won the important games. And then towards the end, they got the results that they needed to get their hands on the Serie B trophy and gain promotion automatically. And I think we're going to see some good football from Parma. And Parma back where they belong in Serie A. And I'm going to be very excited to see them for this season. And then in at 13th, the last place for lower mid-table, I have Udinese. Udinese, they have got some very experienced Serie A players who have been around for a long, long period of time. So they know this league in and out. They know the importance to the fans to constantly remain in Serie A. And they've got just a standard mid-table side now. And then recently acquiring the availability of Alexis Sanchez, who's back at Udinese for the first time in nearly 15 years. And he is a very experienced player, and he's a type of player where you have it in your locker, someone that can perform some magic, do something spectacular in clutch moments to just get you over the line in certain games. And I think that appointment is just going to be the cherry on top of the cake for Udinese to go on and have a decent season. And I don't anticipate they're going to do anything spectacular with the appointment of Alexis Sanchez, but that's the type of signing that they want so that they know that they can have some extra goals at the team. Having him into the side where he's going to do something spectacular and score plenty of goals, I think that will be very crucial for Udinese to just keep them on the right track, because in a couple of years' time, if they keep adding to this team, then eventually they could get to that point where they're in the higher part of the mid-table and maybe one day be back to competing for the European places like they did 10 years ago with that unbelievable squad that they had. But as of right now, lower mid-table, maybe even a little higher, that is the expectation for Udinese Football Club at the minute. Now we're getting into the high part of the mid-table. In at 12th, I'm going for Monza. Obviously, Monza, they've lost a couple of crucial players this window, losing their goalkeeper Di Gregorio to Juve, and they got a replacement in Keylor Navas, who's a very, very experienced goalkeeper, and back in the day was one of the best goalkeepers in the world. So I think his experience will be able to replace the youth and potential that we saw from Di Gregorio for the last couple of seasons. And Keylor Navas is still a decent keeper. I'm not saying he's anything like his former self, but we saw in little spurts in the last few years how he can just produce that magnificent save and crucial saves to keep him in it. And they still got a great number of players that have played for some of the top level clubs in Serie A and proven internationals. So I think that Monza right now, their goal should just be to maintain a mid-table place and just continue to add to the team that they have been doing for the last couple of years, so that they can get to a point where they can compete for the European places. But with the teams that they got above them, I think that is going to be a heavy ask for Monza. But Monza in at 12th. In at 11th, we have got Genoa. Genoa, all across the board, they have got a solid side that can go on to beat certain teams, the likes of Torino, Fiorentina and Lazio, them type of teams. The Genoa can definitely get something from them games. Yet again, I think it will be much too much for them to go on even further than mid-table, but that's where I have Genoa in at 11th. In at 10th, Torino. Torino's a club that's going a bit under the radar at the minute because they were just marginally away from gaining European football. It was obviously, of course, out of their hands where they finished, but if Fiorentina would have won their Conference League final, then the Conference League spot would have gone to Torino. And then, obviously, opportunities for them to get more players and have a higher profile and be a club that a lot of players want to go to with that European football, which adds a lot to the status of a club. But they are in the right direction right now. Like, obviously, finishing 9th last season in Serie A, missing out on European football marginally. And all across the way they play, they're tactically solid and set up brilliantly. Defensively, one of the best sides in the league, I think. Like, they are a very hard team to break down. Obviously, when they go up against the teams that are going to be regarded in finishing Champions League and Europa League, they find a way to open up Torino. But most teams struggle to find a way against Torino. Very well set up, and yet again, very experienced players that have been in Serie A for a long period of time. And Torino now find themselves at a point where they got to just keep trying to push that little bit further so that they can get into them European football places and continue to grow as a club. And Torino is one of the biggest clubs in the country. And I think in a few years' time, we're going to be talking about them as one of the teams that we're going to highly regard and one of the favourites to finish in European football in the league. But as of right now, 10th, bang in the middle of the table. That's how I see Torino at the minute. In at number 9, I have got Fiorentina. A few places down, not in the European places, but then obviously depending on how the Italian clubs do in Europe this season, there could be more spots dropping down and down the table like we saw last season. Italian clubs doing magnificently in Europe that gave the Serie A additional European spots. And I think that they're going to drop down for the fact that, they got Thursday night football again. And I know that was the case last year. But I think it's going to be more of a case of the teams above doing better. And I think that they have got a score to settle in the Conference League, and they are going to go all out for that, because losing 2 Conference League finals in a row for Fiorentina is very disappointing. Very disappointing. But they want to try just that one little bit more. And another thing that really does it is Italiano no longer the coach for Fiorentina, and I think he will be a big miss. He is one of the best coaches in the country at the minute. He's now at Bologna, trying to replicate their success. But as of right now, I think that there's going to be a bit of a decline in Fiorentina due to the fact of European football every Thursday night, a new change in coach, and I think a downgrade, if I'm being honest. And certain players like Gonzalez is on the verge of moving to Juventus, and that's going to be a big miss. And obviously they've still got some quality players in their squad. Like, they do have some really talented players in there, very experienced players as well. So I think it wouldn't be out of the question for Fiorentina to finish in Conference League football, or maybe even challenge for Europa League. But as of right now, I don't see it. So I have Fiorentina finishing at 9th, and in at 8th, narrowly missing out on European football, but potentially still could get European football, I do have Lazio. Last year, Lazio, it was a bit of a weird one. In my opinion. Obviously, Lazio, they finished in Europa League places, and they're going to be playing every Thursday night as well. And losing a key man in the dressing room, and Ciro Immobile, who's gone to Besiktas. And I think slowly just losing value as a team, because we saw the loss of Milinkovic-Savic about a year ago, and he was a big miss. And they're getting all these players in to try and replace some of the talent that they lost. But I just think Lazio at the minute are just slowly declining, in my opinion. And I think we're going to see it even more this season by not making European football. But potentially still could. I mean, also depending on how well they do in Europa League, because they could possibly make it their main goal to try and compete for the Europa League and win it. But I just think that they're they're getting an old team. Obviously, they're starting to try and replace some of the old dogs for some youthful talent. But I just think it's not going to be the sort of season that a lot of fans for Lazio in particular are going to be expecting. Just mainly because of Thursday night football, losing key players in the dressing room, and I think that the teams above them are just going to be that little bit more better. I think Lazio will decline a little bit, but not to the point that they are going to be, disregarded from the European title place picture. It's just going to be a case of the teams above them doing a hell of a lot more better. So Lazio in another 8, just missing out on European football. Now we're getting into the European place picture, and in at 7th, making Conference League, I have got Bologna. Bologna last season were absolutely spectacular to watch. The type of football they were playing and how they managed to get to Champions League football, it was astonishing, and it does a great deal for the town itself of Bologna. And Bologna, who were a former Serie A winning club many years ago, they are in the picture now for European football on a consistent basis. Although they did lose Thiago Motta to Juventus, they're no longer the head coach. Calafiori now at Arsenal, and strong links for most of their players leaving. But with the league just kicking off a week away, and so far no more players have left, the big ones anyway, I think that Bologna could still retain European football, but just narrowly. I think that they would just narrowly get Conference League. I think they will make the European picture. I know a lot of pundits, a lot of YouTubers, a lot of football fans that think that they're going to drop out of Europe entirely now that Calafiori's gone, Thiago Motta's gone. But with the appointment of Vincenzo Italiano, who is a solid, well-proven coach in Serie A, I think he can still get a great deal from this team and keep the track on the right course for Bologna. I really do think that. I think Bologna are going to retain European football, and they're going to make it for a Conference League in at 7th. And then Europa League football, in at 6th, I've gone for Roma. Now, De Rossi, when he came in place of Mourinho, he did a magnificent job. He started getting the results that Mourinho started dropping off towards the end of his time at Roma. And they have got a solid team. But this is just going to be yet another season where a lot of fans have got high hopes for Roma and they're not going to deliver. It's just been the same case for the last 3 years. They've been getting in quality players after quality players. They have got some very well experienced and very exciting players in their team. The likes of Dybala, the likes of Tammy Abraham, Pellegrini, Spinazzola, Mancini, Chris Smalling. They've got some unbelievable players, and they just always seem to not deliver what is expected of them. And on paper, like how I see this team, they should be a consistent Champions League football side in Serie A, but just not been delivering. And yet again, they have got Thursday night football, and that has probably been the thing that maybe has dragged them down, because they have been competing for the European trophies for 3 seasons now. Won the Conference League 3 seasons ago, made the Europa League final 2 seasons ago, and last season making the semi-finals of Europa League and losing to Leverkusen, who were on an unbelievable run. And it's going to be more of the same again. High hopes for Roma to get Champions League football, but they're going to under-deliver towards the end. So Roma in at 6th, and in at 5th, I have AC Milan. Milan have... It's not that I think they're going to be much worse than what they were last year. Just the teams above them are in a much better position at the minute. I really do think that. They've got a new change in coach, and they've got some new faces, and they've let go of a lot of players. Like Giroud, he's gone, and obviously they've brought in Morata. They have brought in Emerson Royale, which I don't understand. I know Calabria has had injury issues, but you're bringing in a right back who I think will be a worse option if they're looking to actually make him the starting right back. And they still do have some world-class players in this team, but overall, I still think they need a solid partner for Tomori. I don't think they have that yet. And then, obviously, they're lacking a few options in midfield that are real consistent quality players. And I think, obviously, Leao still got some work to do. Everything before the final third, everything before he takes the effort, he does magnificently, but he's still lacking that conversion, that real killer instinct that you want from a world-class player, or supposedly world-class player. And Leao is a world-class left winger, one of the best left wingers on the planet, but he still lacks that killer mentality. And I think that Morata is not going to be the striker that AC Milan want or need. So I think that they're going to just miss out on Champions League football and get 5th spot. And that's how I have it for Europa League football. I have Roma in at 6th and Milan at 5th. And now into the Champions League places. And in at 4th, getting Champions League football, it is going to be Atalanta. Atalanta now are in a position to be competing for Champions League football on a regular basis now. They have got an unbelievable squad, and some of the players that they've brought in this window is just going to strengthen them even more. I mean, with the likes of Musa as a goalkeeper who's solid. They've got solid defensive options in Tolio, Ben Godfrey, who they've just recently acquired this season, Scalvini, Zabacosta. They have got a solid team. And I think, obviously, with Koopman is leaving, that is just going to be some extra resources for them to bring in, because he is definitely going to be leaving. He's already put in a transfer request. And then also adding to their attack in Retegay, along with the likes of Scamacca and Lookman, and Di Catalare. They have a Champions League worthy side now. And with their leadership of Gasperini, who is a world-class coach, I don't care what anyone says, a world-class coach who guided them to Europa League glory last year, being the first team to beat Leverkusen all season and beating them comfortably 3-0 with an absolute sensational performance by Lookman. And I think they are definitely one of the best teams in the country right now. And I think that they could even have a good run in Champions League this season and maybe even make the knockout stages. And they've got everything they need in this team. They've got some really talented youth coming through the squad. They have got some experienced players who've been in Serie A for a number of years. And then they have players in their prime who are just on the tear up. And I think we're going to see them in Champions League football back-to-back seasons now. So Atalanta in at 4th. In at number 3, I have Napoli. After their very poor season last year, and the worst title defence in recent history in Serie A, from winning the Scudetto to finishing 10th the following season, obviously there are not going to be high expectations for Napoli, but it is just to do with one man, putting them in at 3rd, and that is Antonio Conte. Antonio Conte is the type of coach where if he goes into the team with the right environment that wants to win, he will get the absolute best from his players almost immediately. And Napoli is the type of team that wants to win. They're not a team that, is constantly overwhelmed with losers mentality, sort of similar that we saw with Spurs. There's just a vibe in Spurs where, you know, nothing's going to be really expected of them. Whereas Napoli, obviously, for a long periods of their history, they obviously haven't amounted to much. But the fans and, you know, the hatred of the teams in the north really gives them that fire that they have to go on and try and accomplish great things in football. And I think that will just add to the motivation of Antonio Conte and make him feel very confident in the project. And that man's a serial winner. He's proved that at Juventus, he's proved that at Chelsea, he's proved it at Inter, and he proved his qualities as a coach for Italy as well when he managed to get us to a quarter-final with a below-average side overall. And they have still got some solid players in this squad. There's obviously the heavy links of Osimhen leaving, but with the season just a week away and nothing progressing any further with Osimhen, I think that they maybe be able to keep him for one more season, and then I think this will definitely be his last season if he's not leaving. And with the likes of, you know, Kvaratskhelia, Di Lorenzo, Nere, Politano, they have got some individual qualities in there to make a good squad. And then I think they're going to be linked with Lukaku coming in if he hasn't already signed. And, you know, they have that experience of getting over the line in Serie A. Obviously winning the Scudetto the season before last. And they play some outstanding football. And I think he will be able to sort out their defence. And then with the attacking qualities that they already possess, they're going to be back in Champions League football. I don't think that they're going to make a serious contention for the title, if I'm being honest. I think it's just going to be a two-horse race for this season. And speaking of which, in at second, I am going with Juventus. I was a bit overhyped last season because we didn't have European football, and I thought that would have made us, you know, just go all out for the title, but we just bottled it towards the end. In the first half, we were keeping up with Inter, but second half, we dropped off massively. And I think we're going to see a bit of a shaky start at the beginning, but business will pick up towards the middle and the end of the season, and we will be competing with Inter, but they are going to go over the line without question because Inter are the best team in the country. And that brings me to who I think is going to win the Scudetto, which is Inter Milan. Best depth of players in Italy at the minute. They've got a very talented, well-proven coach in Inzaghi, who is a serial winner now. He's won plenty of trophies. He's taken Inter to the very peak of European football, which is the Champions League final. And they do have the best team in the country, it has to be said. World-class players in various positions, depth all across the board, which they need. And I think eventually, maybe next season, or it might take us a couple seasons, Juventus time will come where we dethrone Inter and regain our Scudetto. But this season, it's just going to be a case where we have to remain consistent and realistic. And we've been making some good signings this window, signing the likes of Luiz, Thuram. We're on the verge of signing Coop Mainers. We signed Cabral from Verona. We are starting to get depth all across the board, but too much to ask for us to win the Scudetto. This is going to be Inter's year. Again, it's going to be number 21, unfortunately, and that's all I'm going to say on Inter winning the title. But that is my prediction on where I think teams are going to finish this season in Serie A. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Give me your predictions, and I can't wait for this new upcoming season.